Okay, fourth graders, today is Tuesday, January 14th, and we are doing Module 5, Lesson 9. Okay, today your learning goal says I can use an area model and division to show how two fractions are equivalent. This learning goal is really similar to yesterday's, but there was one word that's different. Yesterday's learning goal said I can use an area model and multiplication to show how two fractions are equivalent. Today it says I can use an area model and division. So we're going to see how we can use division today to show how two fractions are equivalent. In this area model, how many total units are there if this is one unit? How many units are there, everyone? 10. So what kind of units are we working with here? Tenths. How many of those tenths are shaded in? 5. So what fraction is represented by this picture? 5 tenths. Good. Now, is there any other way to represent this fraction? What if I didn't think of it as tenths? What if I thought of this as one unit? How many units are there then? Everyone? How many units are there total? 2. And how many of the 2 are shaded in?
1.
So we can say that this represents 1/2 or it represents 5 tenths. Do you guys agree? That means that 1/2 and 5 tenths are equivalent. The past couple of days we've been working on decomposing, which means to break apart. What if I ask you to compose the fraction? If decompose means to break apart, what do you think it means to compose? Garrett? To put together. So we could compose 5 tenths into 1/2 using division. We could show that 5 tenths is the same as 5 divided by 5 instead of having 5 separate sections here, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I could put them together and turn them into one big section by dividing them, by doing 5 divided by 5 equals 1, right? And before we had 10 smaller size units, but I could compose those by doing 10 divided by 5 equals 2. It's kind of like the opposite of what we were doing yesterday. Yesterday we were multiplying by fractions like 5/5, which is really a version of 1. But today we're dividing by fractions like 5/5. What happens if I divide a number by 1? What's 10 divided by 1?
10.
Everyone?
10.
What's 2 divided by 1?
2.
What's 102 divided by 1?
102.
What happens when you divide by 1? The value does not change. So today we're learning how we can divide by a version of 1 to compose or group together different fractions to make equivalent fractions. So we're using division to make equivalent fractions. Now, we know that we're dividing by 5 because we put 5 of the smaller units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, into one group. Do you see that? Okay, that's how you know what you're dividing, what version of 1 you're dividing by. Just like yesterday, we have to write all 3 parts of the equation. We have to say this is our original fraction that the picture was showing, 5 tenths. This is the division we're doing, dividing by 5/5, right? And which equals the equivalent fraction of 1/2. The directions tell us to compose the shaded fraction, so we want to put together smaller size units to compose them to make larger sized units, right? If I put together smaller things, is it making a bigger thing? Absolutely. So the first thing we have to do is to figure out what fraction is being represented by this drawing. How many smaller sized units do we have altogether? The whole has been divided into how many parts? Everyone? 8 parts. So what size units do we have here? Eighths. How many of the eighths are shaded in? 4. So our original fraction is 4/8, but we need to compose it to make them larger than eighths. How many could we put together here? What if I did this? Could that be 1 unit? I know it's hard to see right now. Could I put 4 together in 1 unit and 4 together in the other unit? Could I do that? Okay, go ahead and use a highlighter to show that we're doing that. Now, how many units do we have altogether in our whole? We've now divided our whole into how many units? Everyone? 2. So now my new units are halves. How many of those halves are shaded in? 1. So now we know that 4/8 is equivalent to 1/2. But we also have to use a division sentence, a number sentence using division, to show how we got there. So think to yourself, how many smaller units went into one group? Everyone? 4. So what version of 1 are we going to divide by? 4 over, and we write it like this. In the numerator, 4 divided by 4 equals 1. And on the bottom, 8 divided by 4 equals 2. And are those true math sentences? Is 4 divided by 4 equal 1? Does 8 divided by 4 equal 2? And as we work more and more with fractions, you're going to see that it's important to know your math facts for multiplication and division, which are the same fact families, right? Because we're going to be doing a lot of multiplication and division, and you need to know it like this. Okay, good. So here you can see that we are using division to compose. Smaller size units, an eighth is only this big, but we're composing, we're putting them together to make larger size units like halves. Do you see how 1/2 is much bigger than 1/8? How many times bigger is 1/2 compared to 1/8? Talk at your table groups. How many times bigger?
4 times.
1/2 is 4 times bigger because you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. It takes 4 of the eighths to make 1/2. Okay, very